Chinese President Xi Jinping has urged Donald Trump to pursue a peaceful resolution of the DPRK nuclear crisis and has said he wants to maintain communications with Washington on this matter. So what are Trump's options now? And after a video of several security officers dragging a man off a United Airlines flight goes viral, shares in United have plunged. What would United have to do to recover from this PR fiasco? Welcome to The Point. I'm Lu Xin. Chinese President Xi Jinping has urged the peaceful resolution of the DPRK nuclear crisis in a phone call with his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump. Xi stressed on Wednesday that China insists on the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and expressed the will to maintain communications with Washington on this matter. This comes after the two presidents' first face-to-face meeting at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida, and amid increased tensions on the Korean Peninsula. Over the weekend, the U.S. diverted the USS Carl Vinson aircraft carrier and other battleships from a planned visit to Australia to the Western Pacific, prompting harsh words from the DPRK. In a tweet on Tuesday, Trump reiterated that the U.S. would take action with or without China's help. Will he take further actions without the support of the rest of the world? And will these work? And what would be the consequences of any military action or further sanctions? Joining me now from London is Dr. Kat Yang Kong, Associate Professor of Comparative Politics at the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. Dr. Kong, thank you very much for joining us today. Now, as I said, President Xi called on Tuesday to U.S. President Donald Trump, and this is actually quite an unusual gesture because they just met last week and they only talked on the phone in February. So indeed, it's quite peculiar for him to call in such a short period of time, where he sent this message that China wants the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula be resolved through peaceful means. Why do you think he'd take this particular gesture, and what do you think are the messages he wants to send to the United States?
Well, I think the President Xi called President Trump because there's a real fear that there is the possibility of miscalculation. You know, that the North Koreans they regard the deployment of the American carrier group after the bombing, after the missile attack on Syria, that they regard this as a gesture of intimidation, and that the North Koreans might actually want to show, might want to communicate to the United States that they are not afraid, that this might precisely precipitate North Korean missile launch. So I think President Xi, when he met President Trump, they must have worked out some kind of strategy going forward on the Korean Peninsula. But I think he called him just in order to prevent miscalculation and escalation.
Well, President Donald Trump has said that he wants China to exert greater influence on the DPRK to help reining their nuclear program or their missiles program. Do you think China has this kind of influence?
China has influence, but it is not a decisive influence. China has, in February, China announced that a 10-month halt to North Korean coal imports, and this accounts for 40% of North Korean trade with China. So over time, this will hurt the North Korean economy. Also, Mr. Woo Da-wei met his South Korean counterpart recently, in which they agreed to step up further. China agreed to step up further economic sanctions should North Korea try to test a long-range rocket, or should North Korea embark on a nuclear test. So clearly China can impose economic costs on North Korea. However, only the United States can address the reasons why North Korea is pursuing nuclear weapons. You know, North Korea pursues nuclear weapons for survival reasons, because they're weak economically, militarily, in relation to the US-South Korean alliance. They are isolated. Only the United States can address these core survival concerns of the North Korean regime. And I fear that the missile attack on Syria last week, that this would actually have sent the wrong signal to the North Korean regime. That they see that this might be some kind of prelude to some kind of preemptive attack on North Korea.
Well, in a latest tweet by U.S. President Donald Trump, he tried to link a trade deal with China on how China cooperates with the United States on the DPRK issue. He said, "I explained to the president of China that a trade deal with the U.S. would be far better for them if they solved the North Korean problem." What do you think he's trying to do there? Of course, he's talking to his domestic constituency, but the way how he's talking about this, it sounds like a blackmail.
It actually sounds like it sounds like he's treating it like a business deal, and I don't think international relations can be treated like a business deal. To begin with, the North Koreans, they would not accept being traded over by the United States and China. Hearing this would make the North Koreans actually more intransigent. So yes, China can play a role. It can impose sanctions. It can try to persuade the North Koreans to come back to the negotiating table. But at the end of the day, only if the U.S. talks to North Korea directly, either on the sidelines of the six-party talks or have direct bilateral negotiations, will this problem be solved.
Yeah, you talk about
North Koreans are looking for security.
Sure.
Yes.
Actually, the U.S.'s Secretary of State Tillerson said the U.S. will consider restarting dialogue with the DPRK if they stop nuclear testing. So dialogue was not always the first choice, but he says the possibility is there. But with what they're doing, for instance, sending the carrier group and sending the kind of signal by striking Syria, do you think dialogue is possible at all in the near future under this kind of high tension?
The U.S. is sending mixed signals. You have Secretary Tillerson, and then you have President Trump's tweets. They're sending mixed signals to the North Koreans. The lack of coordination by the United States administration, or it could be a show that what they often say, all options are on the table. But at the moment, I think the deployment of the carrier group and also the strike on Syria, and also the impending change of government in the south. Right now, at this very point, I don't think that the conditions for dialogue to be restarted are so promising right now.
Let's talk about the South. Actually, South Korea's president candidate, one of the presidential candidates, Moon Jae-in, has said on Facebook that the safety of South Korea is as important as that of the United States, and there should never be a preemptive strike without South Korean consent. What would be the effects on South Korea if the U.S. acts unilaterally on DPRK, as it did in Syria?
There's no justification for a preemptive strike on North Korea. North Korea has not attacked anybody, has not attacked any of its neighbors yet. And I don't think there is really any potential for successful preemption. The North Koreans, their nuclear and missile facilities, they are very well dispersed. They are hidden. Especially the uranium nuclear program, this cannot be destroyed in one strike. And North Korea, unlike Syria, also has the capability to retaliate against South Korea with short-range rockets trained on Seoul. So the costs of a preemptive strike, would be absolutely disastrous. The repercussions would be absolutely disastrous for the region, for the world economy.
Finally, it's going to be a big month for the Korean Peninsula. First, there is DPRK Supreme People's Assembly on Wednesday. Saturday marks the 105th birthday anniversary of Kim Il-sung, and there is this big military parade, a drill going on between the US and the ROK. Do you think situation will get even more heated in the month of April if things continue on the same track?
I think you mean the 105th anniversary of Kim Il-sung.
Yeah, Kim Il-sung.
Well, the April, this is the time when the North Koreans have many of their anniversaries. This is when they like to test their rockets. So we just have to hope for restraint. But I think at the very least, the United States and China, they should communicate to the North Koreans, that there is no intention towards regime change, and that there is nothing for North Korea to be gained by continued nuclear and rocket testing. That 20 years of the nuclear program and rocket testing has not made North Korea any safer.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kat-Yan Kong, joining us from the University of London. And you're watching The Point, and here is my take. According to interviews with the US media, Secretary of State Tillerson has said that the US has received China's consent on taking action against the DPRK. But from the telephone conversation that President Xi had with Trump, it is clear that China is insisting on what it has always stood by, a peaceful resolution of the situation. By making a phone call ostensibly to thank Trump for his visit, Xi reiterates China's stance while at the same time trying to dampen Trump's gung-ho attitude. Basically, what the US is doing is to build up the tension around the Korean Peninsula and at the same time put China on top of the volcano and say, solve the problem. Well, if you really want to have the problem solved, give China a chance before the volcano erupts. You are watching The Point. I'll be back right after this. Video of several security officers dragging a man off a United Airlines flight departing from Chicago's O'Hare Airport sparked worldwide outrage on Monday. United Airlines has received widespread criticism, including from the media, netizens, and most recently the US government. The issue has also sparked huge interest on Chinese social media for its possible racial applications. On the Chinese version of Twitter, related articles have been read 770 million times. Yes, 770 million, you're right. To get a different perspective on the issue, I'm joined by two celebrities, I should say. Joe Wan, a Chinese-American comedian, and Malik Nabi, a Chinese student studying in New York. Both of them have over 2 million followers online. We're also joined by Brandon Blackburn-Dwyer, president of Grasshopper Group, an international strategy and marketing firm. But before we start the conversation, let's first take a look at how netizens has been responding to the incident. Brendan, let me come to you first. What is your first reaction when seeing this piece of video of this man forcibly being dragged along the floor of the thin aisle of that plane? How could something like this be possible?
Well, my first reaction is what everybody's reaction was, is that this is completely and utterly outrageous. Regardless of the context, just seeing an individual who is trying to stay in his paid-for seat be forcibly removed by not but 3 large security personnel for nothing other than wanting to stay in his seat is outrageous. Looking at the context, looking at the background, looking at the United Airlines failed attempts to apologize to this, looking at the now sparked racial element, this is one of those scenarios that should become a focusing point for communities across the globe to talk about tolerance, but to also talk about how communities, how companies, and how police forces interact with the public.
Joe, what was your first reaction when you saw this piece of video? What do you think was the most shocking element here?
I think it's the blood on this old man's face that really moved me for the entire day. I mean, I flew United multiple times, and I have received a lot of bad services, promised upgrades or vouchers that never worked out. But those are, really small potato compared what happened to this passenger. So I was really mad for the whole day. I've been tweeting on Chinese social media and stuff. Yeah, and it's just shocking that this kind of thing can happen on United Airlines and in America, and as happens to a lot of instances related to Asian Americans. Not only the instance was upsetting, the aftermath was also very upsetting and disappointing too, because from a lot of mainstream media outlets to a lot of late-night talk show hosts, they would never mention that the victim is an Asian man.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But Malik, you also reacted quite strongly on your social media platform. You made a video actually, and we can see the kind of effort and passion put into there. What made you want to do that video, and what did you want to convey through that message?
Well, very interestingly, I landed in New York by taking the United Airlines, and I didn't get a very nice service as well. And then when I looked at the video, I was shocked, of course, but I wasn't very surprised, because I don't know since when violence became more acceptable, like in the American society, because I've seen this old man get dragged out of the airplane, and things like that had happened before, because one Chinese student who studied in the U.S. were asked to leave the plane because one lady were throwing racial slurs at her. I wasn't very surprised, but I just feel sad that things like that are happening, and I'm sure it will happen again. And I really think, Asian people as a whole should react to this kind of tragedy to get our voice heard. So that's why I made a video, and I just want to raise some concerns, and some concerns in China to get some support for this poor old doctor.
Sure. I mean, for sure, you have all gotten a lot of attention. For instance, Joe, I know your posting got like 100,000 thumbs up and thousands of retweets and comments, and the same thing with Malik's video as well. And Brandon, you also mentioned that racial implication of that incident. However, we do not know whether this was a racial discrimination case, because at this moment, according to the media reports we have seen, the reason why this poor man was picked to be booted from the plane was kind of a random selection by the crew, and he said he was booted because of his Asian background, but you can't really prove it. So are we talking from the air here, gentlemen?
Well,
anybody?
If I can jump in, I mean, I know as the
Go ahead, Brandon.
No, I'm sorry, Joe. I was just going to say, as the white person on the panel, I'm a man. I understand that I am going to have a point of view that may not be with everybody else, but I think it's an important note to say that the incident or the inciting factor may not have been racism. That the report from United Airlines, if it's to believe, was that 4 passengers were selected randomly. 3 of those 4 passengers were bumped and didn't make a deal out of it. The 4th did, which I agree with, and I think is within his rights. But regardless of whether racism was at the start of this incident or not, this has become a racial issue. It has become an identity politics issue. It fits a narrative of minorities being badly treated by companies, by particularly police officers in the United States. So whether it really was racism at the start, whether there's an airline stewardess or flight attendant that was racist, is really not the point, I think, of the outrage. It is that there is an identity element here. The passenger himself did bring up in the video, because I'm Chinese. That element has turned this into a talking point, a focal point across the globe that gives it a racial element.
Sure. But however, if you look at the many media reports on Western media, you don't really hear this aspect. I mean, they haven't made a big point out of this, this being the Chinese part. Joe, what is your impression of the kind of media reports that we have seen on this time?
Yeah. This is very interesting because I started getting interviewed by mainstream media outlets like New York Times, Washington Post, or LA Times since 2010. That was ago. And every time I do an interview, I will mention the discrimination against Asian Americans in show business and in other businesses and institutions. But it never gets reported until yesterday. I wrote this Weibo or Chinese Twitter saying that, basically quoted what this man said, I'm being selected because I'm Chinese. I just said, I'm really grateful for this guy because he actually speaks up. And for some reason, this quote was reported many times in American media. So, it's a sad incident. But on the other hand, I'm hoping this could be more or less of the Rodney King incidents for the Asian American community, for us to realize, a lot of times this community as a whole gets ignored by the mainstream media a lot. So I think in that sense, there could be some good things coming out of it.
Malik, you wanted to say something as well. Do you want to just jump in?
Yeah,
or?
I think it. Yeah, definitely. So I think it's arguable to say that this is 100% discrimination. But however, I believe the American society are less sensitive to the racism towards Asian Americans because the racism exists, but the media tend to ignore it because Asians are less likely to speak up comparing with maybe an African Americans. And if we change the victim, from a Chinese to an African American male, the things might be different. The report might come out different, and maybe the Twitter of the CEO from the United Airlines might also be different because Black Lives Matter are more sensitive than the Chinese Lives Matter.
Do you think if we really create a hashtag of Chinese Lives Matter, it will go viral as well? Or is it about time that the Asian community really have their voice being heard, and they also have to do more to make their voices heard?
I don't think that's going to happen, though.
Well, to be honest,
why not?
No.
Yeah, I think. I think Chinese Lives Matter, like slogan like that doesn't. Sorry, Joe. Doesn't really, it's not very necessary because I do believe all lives matter, and the Chinese Lives Matter actually became viral on the Chinese internet because I saw people are signing petition and has raised more than 100,000 of petition, and also, but I believe Asian Americans should stand up as a whole because when the American society view Chinese or Korean or Japanese, they view them the same because we're all Asian and the discrimination that we got are all the same. It doesn't vary from our nationality or our roots. So
one thing that really impressed me was this ABC instance when Jimmy Kimmel made a comment, and ABC wants to apologize to Asian community, but they don't know who to apologize to because there's no really outstanding Chinese political leader or a Chinese out in America. So it's a really deplorable situation.
Is that why, although this incident has not been characterized a racial discrimination case, people are jumping out because they have been frustrated for so long that they have been trying to get their voices heard and have been failing so far?
Yeah, I think there is a pent-up anger among a lot of Asian Americans. I believe there used to be a survey among different ethnic groups, and among Asian Americans, 70% believe racism against Asian Americans, which is the highest percentage among all races. So there's a good reason for it.
Brendan, what is your perspective? I mean, you live in the United States, you have been living in China, now you've gone back to the United States. What do you think the Chinese community there can actually do better besides being back when something like this happened voluntarily on a daily basis? Do you think there is something that can be done by themselves?
I think there are some things that are being done. I think there already are. I would say that there are no major leaders quite on the level of Black Lives Matter. But Joe, I'd respectfully disagree and say that there have been different advocates. The Academy Awards, which is the Oscars So White, also had a secondary protest that was really about the year that Chris Rock hosted. And in a year of racial sensitivities, he then went ahead and made really insensitive bits about Asian Americans that got a lot of attention. There were a couple of other protests recently. You also see Hollywood taking note. Iron Fist on Netflix got terrible reviews in part because it was bad, but also because of accusations of whitewashing. You had a recent movie, Ghost in the Shell, with lots of accusations of whitewashing and really discriminatory activities against Asian actors. So I think there is a bit of an awakening across mainstream media. It's not happening in the news, but you're also not getting the same sort of public inciting incidents like the Black Lives Matter movement that got unarmed black men shot in the street. Now you have a very calm Asian passenger being mistreated by police. So you may see a larger groundswell. Now what we can do about it is talk about it, for one thing. Two, on campuses across the United States, not just American-born Chinese, but Chinese international students are now one of the largest contingents on universities across the United States. These contingents need to concentrate on not only excelling at their studies, not only learning about American education system, but really embracing their fellow students. Yeah. I would say that there is a little bit too much of an isolation attitude on both sides, and we need to fix that from the ground up.
Yeah,
yeah, I feel very strongly about that because I'm a comedian. Sometimes I go to a campus and do a show. I was like, where are the Asian students? Oh, they were studying.
They're studying. Okay, let's hope that this sad incident can bring about some positive changes to the Asian community and for their future. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Joe Wan, Malik Nabi, and Brandon Blackburn-Dwyer for joining us from different places. And you have been watching The Point. I'll be back right after this with my last point. Whether or not there is a racial aspect to this incident will depend on the results of the investigation. But for too long, fare-paying passengers of all races have suffered from the small print found in the airline's ticketing contracts. It seems to be a case of heads they win and tails we lose. The arrogance shown by the CEO of the United only made matters worse on this occasion, and only after its stock plummeted did he try to make amends. Hopefully, this episode will not only give the airlines pause for thought about the way they treat their customers, but travelers too will start to look closer at their contractual rights. As the slogan of the now defunct airline British Caledonian used to read, "We never forget you have a choice." The Chinese American or the Asian Americans also do. That is for this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. You can download the CGTN live application to watch our show on your mobile devices. And for previous shows, go to the CGTN page on YouTube and click on the playlist. Look for The Point with Liu Xin. Thank you for watching. I'll see you tomorrow at the same time.